You have a complicated relationship with money. Most people do. Not in the way they would immediately admit, not with an obvious dysfunction or a visible crisis, but in the quieter, more personal way that shows up in small daily decisions. The purchase made to manage an emotion. The bill avoided because opening it feels like a confrontation. The salary accepted without negotiation because asking for more felt somehow presumptuous. The savings plan started and quietly abandoned. The month that ended with less than it began with and no entirely clear memory of where it went. These patterns are not random. They are not the product of poor mathematics or insufficient income or bad luck, though those factors can contribute. They are the product of something much older and much more personal. Something that most financial advice never touches. By the end of this video, you will understand what a financial glow-up actually is. Not a budget template. Not an investment strategy. Not a side hustle. You will understand the specific internal transformation that precedes every genuine and lasting improvement in a person's financial life. And you will understand why so many people who acquire the right information, the right tools, the right strategies, still find themselves years later in essentially the same financial position they were always in. Stay with me, because the reason for that is not what most people assume. Most people who struggle financially believe the problem is knowledge. That if they just understood more about investing, about tax efficiency, about the right savings rate, the right asset allocation, the right income strategies, everything would finally shift. And so they read, they listen, they absorb enormous amounts of financial information, and they feel, temporarily, the clarity that comes from understanding something better. And then the days pass, and the behavior does not change, and the financial position does not change, and the information, however accurate and however well understood, remains entirely theoretical. Because the problem was never knowledge. The problem is something far more intimate, far more difficult to examine. And the people who never examine it will cycle through financial strategies for the rest of their lives without ever understanding why the strategies keep failing them. The problem is the relationship, the one you have with money itself. And that relationship, formed long before you had any income to manage, shapes every financial decision you make with a force that conscious strategy almost never overcomes. Let us go there. Every person carries a financial identity. A set of deep, largely unconscious beliefs about what money is, what it means, what people like them are entitled to, what people like them are capable of, and what role money plays in safety, in love, in power, in self-worth. These beliefs were not chosen. They were absorbed from the household you grew up in, from the conversations about money you overheard as a child, the ones spoken and the ones expressed only in tension and silence, from the cultural messages that told you in 100 indirect ways what your relationship with money was supposed to look like. And here is the critical point. These beliefs do not stay in the past. They travel forward into every financial decision you make as an adult. They determine what feels possible and what feels presumptuous, what feels responsible and what feels selfish, what feels like security and what triggers anxiety even when the numbers say everything is fine. Morgan Housel, in his writing on the psychology of money, observed that no one is crazy with money. People make financial decisions that look irrational from the outside but make complete internal sense given their history, their fears, and their understanding of the world. The person who keeps large amounts of cash in a savings account earning almost nothing is not financially illiterate. They are financially traumatized. The cash is not an investment. It is a feeling. The feeling of having something real that cannot disappear overnight the way a portfolio can. Understanding this does not mean excusing every financial pattern. It means understanding where the pattern came from before deciding how to address it. Because a pattern you understand is one you have some power over. A pattern you cannot see operates on you invisibly. And invisibly operating patterns are precisely what most financial advice fails to reach. The financial glow-up begins here, not with a spreadsheet, with an honest examination of the story you carry about money, the beliefs that feel so obvious you have never questioned whether they are true, that wanting more is greedy, that people from your background do not end up wealthy, that money changes people in ways that are bad, that you are simply not the type who is good with money, that financial success is available to others but carries, for you, a specific and nameless risk you cannot quite articulate. These are not universal truths. They are inherited scripts, and inherited scripts can be rewritten. Not easily, not quickly, not without genuine discomfort, but they can be rewritten, and rewriting them is the foundation of everything else. The concept of a money mindset is often discussed in superficial terms. Abundance versus scarcity, positive thinking versus negative thinking. But the real distinction is more precise and more useful than that binary. It is the distinction between a fixed financial identity and a developing one. Between the belief that your relationship with money is a reflection of who you are and the belief that it is a reflection of what you have learned so far, and that learning can continue. Carol Dweck's research on fixed versus growth mindsets applies with particular power to the financial domain. Because money is one of the areas where fixed beliefs are most deeply entrenched and most rarely examined. People who believe they are simply not good with money will consistently find evidence to confirm that belief. Not because they are right, but because the belief shapes the behavior that produces the evidence. They avoid looking at their finances because looking is too painful. They do not negotiate because they believe the outcome is predetermined. They do not invest because they believe investing is for people who understand things they do not understand. And every avoided look, every foregone negotiation, every uninitiated investment confirms the original belief. The loop closes. The identity solidifies. Breaking the loop requires something that feels counterintuitive. It requires acting differently before you feel differently. Taking the action that a person with a different financial identity would take, before you fully believe you are that person. Opening the account before you feel ready. Making the first investment before you feel confident. Having the salary conversation before you feel certain you deserve the outcome. Not because confidence is irrelevant, but because in this domain, action precedes feeling far more reliably than feeling precedes action. Every small financial action taken in the direction of the person you are becoming is an identity anchor. A piece of evidence, small and real, that you are someone who does this. And those anchors accumulate, slowly at first, almost invisibly, until the day you realize that the person managing your money is genuinely different from the person who used to avoid thinking about it. Not because you declared a transformation, because you enacted one uncomfortable decision at a time. There is also the question of financial self-worth, which is distinct from net worth, though the two are connected. Financial self-worth is the degree to which you believe you deserve financial well-being. And this belief, more than almost any other, determines the ceiling of financial behavior. Because you will not build beyond what you believe you deserve to have. Not consciously, but through 1,000 small decisions that collectively ensure your financial life stays within the bounds of what feels appropriate for someone like you. This shows up in the salary accepted without negotiation, in the client rate set below market value, in the discomfort that arrives when income rises above a familiar level, in the subtle self-sabotage that brings things back toward the familiar. These are not accidents. They are the invisible architecture of a financial self-worth that has not kept pace with a developing financial life. Raising financial self-worth is not about affirmations. It is about honest examination of where the ceiling came from. Whose voice told you that you were worth a certain amount and not more? What experience taught you that financial security was for other people? And then, gradually, carefully, with the same patience you would extend to any person working through something genuinely difficult, beginning to question whether that voice was telling the truth. It was not. It was telling you something that was true in its context and is not true in yours. The ceiling is not a fact about you. It is a belief about you. And beliefs, unlike facts, are revisable. Alongside identity and self-worth, a financial glow-up requires what might be called financial presence. The willingness to be genuinely, clearly present with the reality of your finances. Not the approximate reality, the actual reality, the numbers as they are, the spending as it happened, the savings rate as it actually exists rather than as you vaguely intend it to be. Most people have a deeply uncomfortable relationship with financial clarity. Because clarity eliminates the ambiguity that allows for comfortable self-deception. When you do not know exactly where your money is going, you can maintain the belief that it is probably roughly fine, that there is probably roughly enough, that things will probably work out, and that probably is doing an enormous amount of emotional work. It is providing a buffer between you and the specific knowledge that would require specific action. Financial presence dissolves that buffer, and what it reveals is almost always less catastrophic than the anxiety around looking suggested it would be. Not always easy, not always comfortable, but survivable, addressable, human-sized. The act of looking, of knowing the actual numbers, of seeing clearly where things stand, is itself a form of financial self-respect. A declaration that your financial life is something you are willing to be present with. Something you are willing to manage with the same clear attention you would bring to anything else that matters. From this foundation, from a revised identity, a developing self-worth, and a clear-eyed presence with reality, the practical dimensions of a financial glow-up become genuinely possible rather than theoretically understood. Spending with intention, which means making conscious choices about where money goes rather than watching it disappear through the accumulated friction of unconsidered small decisions. Saving with consistency, which means treating the amount set aside for your future self as a non-negotiable commitment rather than what remains after everything else has taken its share. Building income with confidence, which means developing the belief that your skills and your time have real value and that advocating for that value is not arrogance but honesty. And investing with patience, which may be the most psychologically demanding of all the financial disciplines. Because investing requires the willingness to delay gratification, to place resources in service of a future self, to tolerate the uncertainty of not knowing exactly how or when the return will arrive. And this is profoundly difficult for people whose relationship with money is organized around scarcity and anxiety. Because placing money somewhere you cannot immediately access it feels, at the emotional level, like vulnerability, like exposure, like releasing something that felt safe. But here is the truth that the most financially transformed people eventually arrive at. The greatest financial risk is not investing and losing. It is never investing and simply spending the decades. The gradual, quiet, invisible erosion of potential that happens when every available resource is consumed by the present, leaving nothing to compound in service of the future. Compounding, that extraordinary mathematical reality in which returns generate their own returns over time, requires only two things: capital and patience. Most people have access to at least some of both. What they often lack is the identity that allows them to use those resources in service of a distant future they genuinely believe they deserve to reach. That is the glow-up. Not a sudden windfall. Not a viral side hustle. Not a single brilliant investment decision. A fundamental shift in the relationship between a person and their financial life. A shift from avoidance to presence. From inherited limitation to examined choice. From a financial identity assigned by history to one deliberately constructed by someone who has decided that their relationship with money is worth taking seriously. That person is not born. They are built. Through the same slow, honest, sometimes uncomfortable process through which all genuine transformation happens. One clear look at a time. One deliberate decision at a time. One belief examined and revised at a time. You already have more than you think you have to work with. Not just financially, psychologically, the capacity for honest self-examination, the willingness to be present with uncomfortable truths, the understanding that where you are is not a sentence. It is a starting point. Begin there, with honesty, with presence, with the quiet and serious decision that your financial life deserves the same quality of attention you give to the things you already know you care about. The glow-up is not an event. It is a direction, and choosing it genuinely and repeatedly is already the beginning. If something in this shifted something for you, if it named a pattern or opened a door that had been closed, take a moment to leave a like. It is a small thing and it genuinely matters. And if you want to keep exploring ideas like these, ideas about mindset, identity, and the inner work that changes everything on the outside, Audiobook Studio has more here whenever you are ready. Subscribe if it feels right. There is always something worth returning to.